Fu Mingtang drugged me and delivered me to the bed of the enemy crown prince, all just to make me take the place of his beloved in a political marriage. I endured endless humiliation in that hostile land. Meanwhile, Fu Mingtang rose through official ranks, tore up our betrothal contract, and married his true love. After the enemy nation was conquered, I returned to my homeland in glory for my meritorious service in defending the country. Yet, Fu Mingtang publicly declared before the masses that I had willingly submitted to countless men to survive in the enemy nation, tarnishing the nation's dignity. From a celebrated princess honored by all, I became a despised harlot in the eyes of the people. In grief and indignation, I leaped from the city tower to prove my loyalty to the nation with my blood. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Fu Mingtang drugged me. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. Princess, have some tea to cleanse your palate. The voice of my personal maid, Rulin, sounded in my ear. My vision gradually focused, and the clamor around me slowly became audible. I lifted my gaze to see the burly man sitting across from me, none other than the crown prince of the enemy nation. A fear etched deep into my bones made my entire body tremble uncontrollably. Are you feeling unwell? A soft yet magnetic voice reached my ears. I turned to see Fu Mingtang sitting beside me, his deep, peach blossom eyes gazing at me with affection. It dawned on me, this was the banquet held in honor of the enemy prince's visit. Had I been reborn? Princess, this is your favorite Biluo-chun tea. Drink it quickly, or it won't taste as good when it cools, Rulin urged me. I stared fixedly at the teacup before me. This very cup had destroyed everything in my past life. I never imagined that my personal maid had long been working for Fu Mingtang. In my previous life, Rulin followed Fu Mingtang's orders and slipped an aphrodisiac into my tea. When I lost consciousness, she delivered me to the crown prince of the enemy nation. By the time I awoke, I had already become the royal capital's scandal. My father, the emperor, had no choice but to send me away in a political marriage. It wasn't until later that I realized everything was Fu Mingtang's scheme. Because the original princess meant for the political marriage was my illegitimate and unloved younger sister Wei Ruoshi, Fu Mingtang stared at me motionlessly, insisting I finish the tea. I picked up the teacup and drank slowly, and only then did he seem satisfied enough to turn his head away. Casually taking out the handkerchief from my sleeve, I pretended to wipe my mouth while quietly spitting all the tea into the cloth. Rulin, I'm feeling rather tired, help me back to my chambers. I feigned discomfort. Yes, princess. Rulin immediately helped me leave the banquet. Sure enough, the path she was taking me back led toward the crown prince of the enemy nation's bedchamber. Isn't this the wrong direction? I spoke coldly. Rulin hurriedly dragged me forward by the arm, completely failing to notice my already sober expression. Rest assured, Your Highness, you'll sleep very comfortably tonight. Her voice carried a sly undertone. How dare you? I flung my sleeve aside. Glaring at her as if she were already dead, Rulin started violently, finally looking directly at me, and with that single glance, she immediately fell to her knees with a thud, trembling in fear. Spare me, princess, this foolish maid lost her way. I'll escort Your Highness back to the bedchamber at once. I let out a cold laugh, pinching her chin with my fingers to force her to look up at me. Rulin, oh Rulin, in vain have I regarded you as my most trusted confidant all these years. How dare you collude with others to set a trap for me? Do you know the consequences of choosing the wrong path? Rulin's face turned deathly pale, her expression filled with terror. She immediately began kowtowing frantically on the ground. Rulin knows her wrongs. It was General Fu who threatened this servant. Rulin never wanted to do this. I beg Your Highness to spare my life. Please spare me. She kept kowtowing until her forehead bled, not daring to stop. I leaned down close to her ear and whispered, You know this well, the one thing I can never tolerate by my side is disloyalty. I slowly pulled out the hairpin from her head and held it before her. Rulin widened her eyes in disbelief, tears mingling with blood as they continuously dripped down. Will you do it yourself? Or shall I summon the Ministry of Justice? I smiled as I watched her. She shook her head despairingly, then took the hairpin and without hesitation plunged it into her own neck. Instantly, blood sprayed out, a few drops staining my skirt. I frowned. How unlucky to be tainted by this lowly maid's blood. Irritated, I lifted my foot and kicked her in the chest. She rolled several times on the ground before breathing her last. Afterward, I went to Wei Ruoshi's bedchamber. Seeing me, she seemed shocked. Sister, why have you come here? I didn't respond, simply raising my hand to deliver a stinging slap across her face. How dare a bastard-born wretch like you have the audacity to address this princess as sister? Wei Ruoshi covered her reddened cheek with tears welling in her eyes. Paired with her naturally aloof features, she presented such a pitiful sight that surely any man who saw her would be moved. Wei Ruoshi bowed respectfully toward me. This humble sister pays respects to Her Highness Princess Changle. May your highness live 1,000 years. I raised my eyes to signal my attendant, who nodded and immediately placed the teapot he was holding on the table, pouring out a cup of tea. I took the cup of tea in my hand and examined it. Wei Ruoshi, today this princess is in a good mood. I grant you a sip of tea. I handed the tea to her. Her face turned pale as she tremblingly accepted the cup. Thank you, Princess Changle, for bestowing this tea. Unfortunately, Ruoshi is feeling unwell today. How dare you? I cut her off sharply. This is the finest Biluo-chun tea personally selected by His Majesty for me. I specially came to invite my sister to savor it, yet you have the audacity to refuse me. Face. I pinched Wei Ruoshi's face and forcibly poured the entire cup of tea down her throat. Wei Ruoshi choked violently, coughing while desperately trying to dig the tea out of her throat with her fingers. I kicked her to the ground, planted my foot on her face, and ground it in fiercely a few times. She couldn't move an inch. I laughed. Isn't this just ordinary tea? Why are you so terrified that you had to spit it out? Wei Ruoshi averted her eyes, not daring to look at me. Guilty conscience. Wei Ruoshi, you always pretend to be detached from worldly affairs and innocent, but deep down, you're just as despicable as your ungrateful mother. Wei Ruoshi was the daughter of the Plum Consort from the Cold Palace. This Plum Consort was originally named Chunju and had been my mother's personal maid. To climb the ranks and transform into a phoenix, she used her seductive charms to lure the emperor while my mother was gravely ill, successfully rising in status and giving birth to Wei Ruoshi and her younger brother Wei Anming. My mother never imagined that Chunju, whom she regarded as a confidant, had been using her all along. Overwhelmed with fury, she coughed up blood and passed away. Later, it was by my hand that Chunju was sent to the Cold Palace. As for Wei Ruoshi and her brother, I spared them out of pity, believing them innocent only to realize too late that this single act of mercy would lead to my own ruin. Finally raising her head, she glared at me and said, I won't allow you to speak of my mother like that. Did I speak falsely? My mother regarded Chunju as her confidant, yet she climbed into the emperor's bed while my mother lay gravely ill, causing her to vomit blood and die. Isn't this the height of ingratitude? I gripped her throat and stared straight into her eyes. And not only did you seduce your own sister's husband, but you also conspired with Fu Mingtang to drug me with aphrodisiacs, attempting to deliver me to the enemy prince's bed. Aren't you utterly shameless? Her eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't believe I knew everything. I patted her cheek and studied her carefully. This face of yours is so coldly exquisite. Wouldn't a touch of desire make it even harder for that enemy prince to resist? You wouldn't dare. If you do this, Fu Mingtang will never let you off. She glared at me with reddened eyes. Now you're not even pretending anymore. Fu Mingtang had already achieved remarkable military feats by 17, and by 20 he was appointed as the Banner General. Because of his boundless future prospects, my imperial father betrothed me to him. At that time, we were just awakening to love. I was the eldest imperial princess, my beauty and talents unrivaled in the capital, while Fu Mingtang was young and accomplished, handsome and dignified. Neither of us had any objections to this marriage arrangement. I thought we would smoothly marry and become the talk of the capital. But the moment Fu Mingtang laid eyes on Wei Ruoshi, everything quietly changed. It was at my birthday banquet when Wei Ruoshi, who had always disliked public appearances, suddenly announced she would perform a dance for me, and she was dressed entirely in white. Though Wei Ruoshi wasn't strikingly beautiful, her features resembled Guanyin, with an ethereal and aloof aura. The white robes only accentuated her refined, otherworldly grace, as she danced with effortless elegance. I noticed the look in Fu Mingtang's eyes, a gaze he had never once bestowed upon me. There was a barely perceptible glimmer in his gaze, admiration, pleasant surprise, a flutter of emotion. Then an overwhelming sense of loss washed over me. I knew Fu Mingtang had never belonged to me, nor would he ever belong to me again. Little did I know this thought would soon be confirmed. Fu Mingtang began secretly meeting Wei Ruoshi behind my back, and she made no effort to hide it either. They would chat freely together, appearing restrained and proper on the surface, yet their interactions were undeniably ambiguous. Fu Mingtang told me he simply shared common interests with her, which was why they talked more, and urged me not to jump to conclusions. 3 months later, The crown prince of the enemy state arrived for diplomatic negotiations, offering a marriage alliance as the price for ceasefire. Among all the princesses, only Wei Ruoshi and I were of suitable age. As the legitimate eldest princess, I naturally wouldn't be sent for the alliance. Moreover, my betrothal to Fu Mingtang had long been settled, thus Wei Ruoshi became the inevitable choice for the political marriage. Fu Mingtang could no longer remain composed. Only when faced with imminent loss did he realize his feelings for Wei Ruoshi had become an irretrievable flood. A man forged on battlefields like him would never hesitate over dilemmas. Between the two options, he decisively chose to sacrifice me to save his beloved. As for Wei Ruoshi, the ultimate beneficiary, how could she possibly remain unaware of exactly how she'd escaped her predicament? I gazed at her coldly. Wei Ruoshi thought she could remain unharmed as long as Fu Mingtang was by her side. What a naive delusion. I said icily, how confident you are, rest assured. Fu Mingtang won't be spared either. As for this joyful union powder, you may enjoy it all by yourself. Wei Ruoshi struggled to rise, but the drug had already taken effect. Her consciousness gradually blurred before she collapsed into unconsciousness. I stood up, clapped my hands, and commanded, carry her into the enemy crown prince's bedchamber. Remember, if any of you slip up, it's death without mercy. The servants behind me immediately knelt and responded, as you command. The enemy crown prince, thoroughly drunk, was helped back to his room by several attendants. Soon, unspeakable sounds emerged from within, hidden in the shadows. I listened with relish, my heart swelling with satisfaction. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared before the palace hall, that silhouette I could never mistake even in death. It was Fu Mingtang. He stood outside the hall with his hands clasped behind his back, his voice betraying no emotion. Wei Qingtang, I've wronged you in this matter. If you must resent anyone, resent me. Ruoshi isn't like you, she's suffered too much since childhood. I can't let her endure hardship in an enemy nation. But you're Wei Kingdom's most cherished princess. I believe if you marry there, they wouldn't dare mistreat you. Not a trace of remorse could be heard in Fu Mingtang's words, only utter self-assurance. Wei Ruoshi suffered because of her own mother's sins. What did that have to do with me? Just because my life had been better than hers, was I supposed to suffer in her stead? Fu Mingtang arrogantly assumed my noble status would earn me preferential treatment in the enemy nation. But he was wronged there. I lived worse than livestock. The more noble the princess, the more they sought to trample her underfoot. In my past life, after being sent as a peace bride to the enemy nation, I was reduced to a lowly maidservant at everyone's mercy. Even the lowest ranking guards could humiliate me. The more I resisted, the more inventive their torments became. They subjected me to endless humiliation, throwing me into pigsties to fight livestock for scraps of food. My dignity was shattered and ground into the dirt, yet from beginning to end, I never shed a single tear. Eventually, I endured until the enemy nation fell. Remembering my contributions to defending our country, the state of Wei welcomed me back with great honor. On the journey back to the capital, the common people lining both sides of the road showered me with flowers, chanting, Princess Changle has suffered for our nation. Tears finally streamed down my face, the first I had shed in 3 years. I had thought all hardships were finally over, that I could strive to leave the past behind and start anew. Yet, Fu Mingtang shattered my hopes once more. It happened during a state banquet, when Wei Ruoshi deliberately came to provoke me. By then, she was already Fu Mingtang's lawful wife, offering me tea with her 8-month pregnant belly protruding. I've long owed elder sister a word of thanks, she said. Thank you for stepping aside back then, allowing Mingtang and me to be together. I'm living very happily now. I wonder how elder sister fared in the enemy country. Her radiant smile made me sick to my stomach. Without a word, I flung that scalding cup of tea straight into her face. She screamed and immediately collapsed to the ground. Fu Mingtang rushed over to help her up, then sharply declared in front of everyone, rumors say that Princess Changle, to survive in the enemy country, willingly submitted to countless men, long casting aside propriety and dignity, developing into an unreasonable, shrewish character. Now it seems these rumors were not unfounded. As his words rang out, I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been slowly poured over me from head to toe. I stood frozen in place for a long time, motionless, while the murmurs of gossip gradually reached my ears, and countless scrutinizing eyes fell upon me. Back then, I was helpless and at a loss, ultimately covering my face as I fled in disgrace. Not long after, rumors began spreading among the people about my scandalous behavior in the enemy country, how I pleased their men, how I degraded myself willingly into servitude. I went from being the celebrated meritorious princess to a woman despised by all. Remembering this, my nails dug deep into my palms until blood pooled on the ground. I stared at Fu Mingtang standing ahead with his hands clasped behind his back. Waves of hatred surging within me. I wished I could slice him into 1,000 pieces, but that would be too merciful. I wanted him to watch as he destroyed everything he loved most with his own hands. The sounds inside the room rose and fell incessantly. What would Fu Mingtang feel if he knew the person inside was none other than Wei Ruoshi, the beloved he had so carefully protected? I left without a trace of emotion. That night, I slept exceptionally soundly. Early the next morning, the maid Kuya woke me up. Something terrible has happened, princess. I rose leisurely and asked, what is it? General Fu has gathered a large group of clan relatives, saying they're going to catch adulterers in the enemy prince's quarters. They claim the princess has been secretly having an affair with the enemy prince. I burst into laughter. Come, help me with my makeup. Today is a good day, I shall wear the brightest red. Kuya asked in confusion. Princess, why aren't you panicking at all? Shouldn't you immediately go and clear up the rumors? No, the show is about to begin. When it does, the rumors will collapse on their own. By the time I arrived, Fu Mingtang was already leading a large group of clan members outside the crown prince's palace of the enemy kingdom. He clasped his hands in salute and called out loudly, Mingtang has invited you all here to seek justice for me. Princess Changle has broken off her engagement with me, disregarding the dignity of the royal family, and is secretly involved with the crown prince of an enemy state. I implore you all to uphold justice for me. General Fu, slandering the royal family is a grave crime, the leader shouted sternly. Fu Mingtang, however, looked utterly confident. You may all follow me inside to see the truth for yourselves, he said, raising his hand to open the door. I cleared my throat and said, I heard someone is spreading rumors about me. The crowd turned at the sound, watching as I approached slowly in my crimson gown. Greetings to Princess Changle, they chorused in unison, bowing with folded hands. When Fu Mingtang caught sight of me, his eyes widened momentarily before he froze in place. Preposterous, with Princess Changle standing right here. What possible explanation can you give? Fu Mingtang, how dare you slander and spread rumors about Princess Changle? Your heart deserves execution. Fu Mingtang, have you lost your mind? Amid the continuous accusations from the crowd, I slightly raised my hand. It's all right. I believe General Fu must have misunderstood. Last night, as I passed by, I indeed heard some peculiar noises. Why don't we go in and see for ourselves who the adulterers really are? Yet Fu Mingtang's hand, resting on the door, remained motionless, his eyes dark and unreadable. I pushed him aside without hesitation, raised my foot, and with a loud boom, the door was kicked open by me, the strong scent of musk assaulting my nostrils. On the bed, two people were nestled together, the crown prince of the enemy country raising his head with drunken, bleary eyes to look. Ah, I screamed, covering my eyes. Wei Ruoshi, how could you engage in such disgraceful acts within the palace? Hearing Wei Ruoshi's name, Fu Mingtang rushed in like an arrow. When he saw the jade-like face on the bed, his face turned deathly pale. His body stiff as a lightning-struck dead tree, rooted motionless to the spot. The room was deathly silent, with the clan members exchanging uneasy glances. Their expressions varied. Wei Ruoshi finally came to her senses, seeing the room full of people. She let out a piercing scream and pulled the quilt over herself to cover her body. Outrageous, outrageous. Princess Ruoshi, how could you debase yourself like this? What face does this leave for our state of Wei? This is a disgrace to our nation's dignity, a disgrace. The cries of lament from the imperial clan filled the air. The crown prince of the enemy nation rose leisurely, arrogance gleaming in his eyes. So this beauty turns out to be a princess of Wei Kingdom. Your Wei hospitality towards outsiders is truly generous and thoughtful. He then wore an expression of lingering satisfaction, utterly repulsive. I glared at him and said sharply, Crown Prince of the enemy nation, I advise you to watch your tongue. This is Wei Kingdom, not some backwater corner of yours. My sister Wei Ruoshi has always been pure as ice and unsullied as jade. If she's behaving like this, she must have been drugged by someone with ill intentions. I approached Wei Ruoshi and spoke softly. Ruoshi, tell me, who was it that drugged you? Harming royalty and tarnishing a princess's virtue is a crime punishable by extermination of 9 generations. Wei Ruoshi looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Too afraid to speak, the one who had drugged her was Fu Mingtang. I had merely taken advantage of the situation. If Wei Ruoshi dared to accuse me, the investigation would ultimately lead back to Fu Mingtang. Wei Ruoshi glanced back at Fu Mingtang behind her, and Fu Mingtang cowardly lowered his head. In the end, she shook her head and whispered weakly, "No one drugged me, I just drank too much and entered the wrong room." Ah, what a touching display of mutual affection, what profound devotion between lovers. I smiled at her, my eyes brimming with endless mockery. "How foolish you are, dear sister." She glared at me fiercely, as if she wanted to skin me alive. With my maneuvering, this scandal spread throughout the imperial capital, making Princess Wei Ruoshi the inevitable candidate for the political marriage alliance. Yet I still underestimated Fu Mingtang's capabilities. On the very day of the marriage alliance, he intercepted Wei Ruoshi's carriage. The emperor frowned and rebuked, "Fu Mingtang, do you realize what you're doing?" Fu Mingtang knelt before him, raising the tiger tally recently bestowed by the emperor, and declared loudly, "This general is willing to exchange my position as Biaoqi Grand General to spare Princess Ruoshi the humiliation of this political marriage." Silence suddenly fell all around, leaving only the fluttering of war banners in the wind. The border situation is currently tense. Yet Fu Mingtang declares he will no longer serve as the banner general. This is clearly a threat to the emperor. Your reason? The emperor's displeasure was evident. Trading a woman's lifelong happiness for border security is the shame of all military men. Suddenly, he drew his sword and slashed his palm. Blood streamed down, dripping onto the ground. "If your majesty grants me 3 months, I swear to crush the enemy and wash away this disgrace with blood." The emperor gazed at the blood slowly spreading across the ground, then suddenly clapped his hands and laughed heartily. "Excellent, this is the true mettle of our Wei kingdom's warriors." He turned and barked at the ceremonial officer, "Issue the decree, the marriage alliance shall be postponed. I want to see how General Fu intends to trample this enemy territory flat for me." I watched everything coldly. His act of retreating to advance was truly masterful. It preserved Wei Ruoshi's safety while earning him a reputation for loyalty and bravery. Though General Fu Mingtang's boast about trampling enemy territory was utterly ridiculous, what a pity he lacks the capability to back such grand claims. In my previous life, the one who destroyed the enemy nation and rescued me from dire straits wasn't Fu Mingtang, but my younger brother Wei Yochi. From the moment I was sent away for political marriage, even as crown prince who could perish on the battlefield at any time, he marched to war without hesitation. It took him 3 full years to overthrow the enemy kingdom and bring me back to Wei. Yet within a year, Wei Yochi was stripped of his crown prince title and executed for alleged treason. Fu Mingtang seized the opportunity to support Wei Ruoshi's younger brother Wei Anming's ascension. Only then did I realize this was yet another of Fu Mingtang's schemes, but alas, it was far too late. I was left utterly defenseless in Wei, with nothing but boundless despair. Death became my only way to prove my loyalty. The day I stood by the city wall, the biting wind cut like knives, stinging my cheeks. My plain white mourning robes flapped violently in the wind as I clutched Yochi's ashes tightly to my chest. Wei Yochi had lived a life of unyielding integrity, serving his country faithfully. He didn't deserve to bear such accusations. Below the city wall, a dark mass of people pointed and whispered, their gazes at me dripping with venom. "Look. That's the Princess Changle who was defiled in the enemy country. If the crown prince rebelled, how clean could his sister be? Pa, she's dirtying the land of Wei." As I listened, I suddenly laughed until tears streamed down my face. How laughable. I once married for the sake of my country, enduring endless humiliation, only to have Fu Mingtang publicly expose those shameful past events after my return. I had thought that as long as I endured, at least I would still have my younger brother by my side, but now, even Yochi has been killed by them. I lowered my head to look at the casket of ashes in my arms, my trembling fingers tracing the patterns on its surface. "Yochi, it's your sister's fault. I dragged you into this." Fu Mingtang stood beneath the city tower, embracing Wei Ruoshi at the forefront of the crowd, looking up at me with cold eyes. Hatred burned like raging fire as I glared at him, my voice hoarse as a vengeful ghost. "Fu Mingtang, you schemed to have me defiled by enemy hands, subjected me to humiliating political marriage, you sullied my reputation, destroyed my dignity, and now you won't even spare my younger brother. You preach loyalty to sovereign and country, yet slaughter the loyal for personal gain. How dare someone like you continue breathing?" Fu Mingtang's expression darkened momentarily, but he quickly regained his lofty demeanor and said coldly, "Wei Qingtang, have you lost your mind? The Crown Prince's rebellion is irrefutably proven. What does that have to do with me? Unlike you, a lowly woman trampled upon by thousands in an enemy nation, how dare you stand here questioning this general? His words cut like knives, gouging deep into my heart. I laughed like a madman. Solid evidence. Ha, Fu Mingtang, do you really think there's no retribution in this world? Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you off. I'll have you torn limb from limb. I'll make sure you die without a burial place. They all thought I'd gone mad, each one laughing at me, their eyes filled with endless mockery. I suddenly threw open my arms, my mourning robes fluttering wildly in the wind. If heaven has eyes, grant Wei Qingtang the justice she deserves. I want Fu Mingtang to pay in blood. May he die a wretched death. With these words, I leapt forward. The wind howled in my ears as the screams of the crowd faded into the distance. I closed my eyes. Boom. I collapsed in a pool of blood, the ashes from the casket I was holding scattering across the ground, mingling with my blood as it flowed toward Fu Mingtang's feet. The sky suddenly changed, and in the midst of June, snowflakes began to drift down. As I gazed at the vast expanse of white, I finally breathed my last. On my way back to the palace, someone blocked my path. Wei Ruosh's younger brother, Wei Anming. Was it you who forced that medicine down my sister's throat? He glared at me. His eyes filled with malice. Ha, she brought it upon herself. She deserved it, I replied with a smile. His eyes turned cold, carrying a faint hint of killing intent. I felt a surge of vigilance. Wei Anming had always been an enigma. Before I could react, he raised his sword and pointed it at me. The blade's cold glint flashed as it shot straight for my throat. I instinctively took half a step back when a sharp gust of wind suddenly slashed toward Wei Anming's wrist. Clang. The long sword clattered to the ground as Wei Anming grunted in pain. Staggering backward, I turned my head to see Wei Yoqi standing beside me. His face dark as frost, murderous intent churning in his eyes. Wei Anming, he enunciated each word icily, his voice piercingly cold. Are you seeking death? Wei Anming clutched his numb wrist, his gaze shifting between me and Yoqi before suddenly twisting into a sinister smile. His Highness the Crown Prince certainly knows how to throw his weight around. Don't misunderstand, I was merely joking with Princess Changle, who knew she'd be so easily frightened. Wei Yoqi snapped furiously. Get out. Wei Anming narrowed his eyes, then finally bent to pick up his sword. Before leaving, he cast me a meaningful glance. Princess Changle, we have all the time in the world. Only when his figure had completely disappeared did I slowly exhale and turn to Wei Yoqi. Why are you here? Wei Yoqi didn't answer, only stared in the direction Wei Anming had left, his eyes frighteningly dark. Since my rebirth, Wei Yoqi had been in the south dealing with the drought among the common people. So this was my first time seeing him. Remembering the scene from my past life where he was executed immediately, I suddenly felt a pang in my nose. He abruptly withdrew his gaze and looked at me, his expression indescribably complex. Elder sister. That sister made my heart skip a beat. His tone. Something was off. My voice trembled slightly. Did you know all along that Wei Anming would come to block my way? Wei Yoqi fell silent for a moment, then suddenly raised his hand. His fingertips gently brushing a stray lock of hair by my ear as he murmured, because in our past life, he stopped you here too. My entire body stiffened, as if my blood had frozen solid in an instant. How could he know about my past life? Wei Yoqi looked at my shocked expression and suddenly let out a bitter laugh. Elder sister, you've returned too, haven't you? I stared fixedly into his eyes, finally recognizing the familiar anguish deep within them. Yoqi, my voice trembled. Did you also get reborn? He closed his eyes briefly, and when they reopened, his gaze was resolute. Yes, in this life, I won't let anyone hurt you again. So Wei Yoqi had returned at the same time as me. When he rushed back from Jiangnan only to find I'd already seen through Fu Mingtang's scheme and made Wei Ruoshi suffer the consequences of her own actions, he realized I'd been reborn just like him. He unfolded a list on the desk. Since returning, I've been gathering evidence of Fu Mingtang's factionalism and self-serving schemes, he said calmly. My fingers lightly traced over the list. Zhu Mian from the Ministry of War, Zhao Rui the Shuozhou Deputy General, these are all his trusted allies recruited for Wei Anming. Fu Mingtang certainly knows how to pick them all inconspicuous yet crucial positions. Sister missed this one. A slender hand suddenly reached from behind, pointing to the end of the list. The cinnabar on his fingertip drew a blood-red circle around Zheng Luan, Minister of the Imperial Stud, saying, those who manage the imperial horses can come into contact with the royal carriage during ancestral sacrifices. I abruptly looked up, meeting Wei Yoqi's profound gaze. Dark circles faintly shadowed his eyes, clear signs of sleepless nights. In my past life, It was precisely because a guard suddenly assassinated the emperor during the ancestral sacrifice ceremony. And later that man claimed to be Wei Yochi's subordinate, so the Shoujo army was the decoy, while the real killing move lay with the imperial horses. I slowly clenched the name list tighter. Wei Yochi suddenly sneered and took out a black iron token from his robe, tossing it onto the table. The characters Shu or Ju on the token had been forcibly scratched off, revealing the underlying mark of Yulin. Fu Mingtang had Shu or Ju's troops impersonate the Yulin army in their operations. The Yulin army was the emperor's personal guard, authorized to carry weapons close to him during ceremonies. However, only the emperor and the crown prince could truly mobilize the Yulin army. Thus, in the previous life, when those fake Yulin troops rebelled during the sacrificial ceremony, it was naturally assumed to be the crown prince's doing. He even dared to forge the token. I laughed bitterly in anger, my nails scraping against the table with a grating sound. Was he really in such a hurry to take your life? Unlike our previous life, the two of us have become harder to deal with, so naturally, he couldn't resist acting sooner. 3 days ago, I sneaked into the Shoujo military camp at night and discovered they were secretly modifying their armor, he said in a low voice. The inner lining was embroidered with dragon patterns. I gasped. This was meant to frame the crown prince for rebellion. A thunderclap exploded outside the window, illuminating half of Yochi's face. His eyes churned with the same ruthless determination. I remembered the very look he had when he was dragged to the execution platform in our past life. Elder sister, it's time to draw in the net. He picked up the vermilion brush and drew a glaring red line across the list. Like a streak of blood, I removed the coiled dragon jade pendant from Wei Yochi's waist and examined it carefully under the candlelight. The white jade was smooth and warm, the dragon pattern lifelike, a symbol of the crown prince's status. What do you mean by this? Wei Yochi looked at me in confusion, his brow slightly furrowed, a cold smile curled at the corner of my lips. This is the bait. Wei Yochi's eyes flashed with understanding. You're trying to lure Fu Mingtang into a trap. I tucked the jade pendant into my sleeve. Since he dared to forge your token, he'll naturally be interested in this jade pendant too, with the ancestral ceremony approaching. If the crown prince's jade pendant accidentally falls into his hands, he'll surely make use of it. But what if, during the confrontation, his pendant turns out to be fake? Elder sister's plan is brilliant. Outside the window, the night grew deeper. I gazed at the brightly lit general's residence in the distance, the dwelling of the person I hated most in both this life and the last. This time, I will make him pay in blood. At dusk the next day, I deliberately changed into a plain white gauze dress and prominently fastened the imitation coiling dragon jade pendant at my waist. The Jade Fragrance Pavilion was along Fu Mingtang's daily patrol route through the palace grounds. I had someone prepare a pot of strong liquor and sat alone in the pavilion, pouring myself drink after drink. When the familiar footsteps approached, I immediately feigned a drunken stupor and slammed the wine pot heavily onto the stone table. I choked back a sob and murmured to myself, "Why are you treating me like this? What is the princess doing here?" Came the voice of Fu Mingtang. I turned slowly, letting the jade pendant at my waist glow softly in the setting sun. Sure enough, his gaze was immediately drawn to it. His pupils contracting slightly, I staggered to my feet, my eyes red-rimmed. "I gave you my whole heart. Why did you betray me? You think I know nothing, don't you?" "The princess is drunk," he interrupted coldly. I grabbed his sleeve abruptly. "That cup of tea, you know perfectly well what was in it." Fu Mingtang's expression changed slightly, and he instinctively glanced around. After confirming no one was nearby, he lowered his voice. "Princess, be careful with your words. This subject has no idea what you're talking about." I slumped onto the stone bench, pressing my forehead against the icy stone table. "I wish I'd never met you." As I spoke, my voice gradually weakened until I feigned drunken exhaustion and collapsed onto the table in pretended slumber. The pavilion fell into complete silence. After what seemed an eternity, footsteps finally retreated into the distance. When I opened my eyes, the jade pendant at my waist had already vanished. The fish has taken the bait. 7 days later, the ancestral worship ceremony commenced. Clad in formal crimson palace attire, I stood with the other imperial consorts at the periphery of the imperial ancestral temple. Wei Ruoshi claimed illness and didn't attend. Without needing to be told, I guessed Fu Mingtang had kept her away to prevent accidental harm during the impending chaos. Just as well, it saved me the trouble of dealing with her before the temple. Incense smoke curled upward as Wei Yochi, dressed in the bright yellow court robes of the crown prince, performed the grand ritual of 3 kneelings and 9 prostrations. The emperor had just raised the ceremonial wine when a guard beside the imperial carriage suddenly lunged forward, a cold glint flashing from his sleeve. My pupils constricted, the dagger was mere inches from the emperor's throat. "Protect his majesty," Fu Mingtang's roar echoed as blades were drawn in unison. He leaped in front of the emperor, his sword deftly deflecting the assassin's dagger with precision. At this moment, over 20 imperial guards simultaneously drew their swords, their cold steel all pointing at the emperor. Fu Mingtang formed a human wall with his soldiers, shielding the emperor at the center. Wei Yochi cut down 3 rebels amidst the chaos, their blood splattering across his pale face. Yet when the crown prince approached, the rebels didn't harm him in the slightest. To outsiders, it looked as though they were in league with him. The act was flawlessly performed. I hid in the shadows observing as the chaotic battle raged on. After a prolonged struggle, the last rebel was subdued by Fu Mingtang, with over a dozen corpses already strewn haphazardly before the imperial ancestral temple. The emperor, furious, pointed at the rebel forced to kneel and roared, "Speak, who dares to be so bold as to order your assassination attempt on me?" The rebels remained silent as iron. Suddenly, Fu Mingtang swung his blade, and a severed head rolled to the ground. "Confess the truth, or this will be your fate." His sword dripped with blood, his gaze icy. I watched his performance coldly when suddenly a guard stumbled forward. "Your Majesty, we found this on the rebel leader." The object he held high was none other than the coiled dragon jade pendant. The coiled dragon jade pendant. The emperor snatched it away, his face darkening. He whirled toward Wei Yochi, "Treacherous son. What is the meaning of this?" The entire hall erupted in uproar. Before Wei Yochi could speak, the restrained imperial carriage assassin suddenly raised his head and gave the crown prince a tragic smile. "Your Highness, this humble servant has failed the mission. I shall now atone with death. I beg you to spare my family." With these words, he actually bit off his own tongue, blood spraying forth as he collapsed dead on the spot. The emperor, furious, hurled a jade pendant at Wei Yochi. "You unfilial wretch, what more do you have to say?" Wei Yochi stood straight-backed, his gaze steady, showing not a trace of panic. I immediately knelt down and pleaded urgently. "Father Emperor, Yochi grew up before your eyes. No one knows his character better than you. He would never commit such treasonous acts. This must be a malicious frame-up. I beg your Majesty to investigate thoroughly." From the crowd, Wei Anming sneered mockingly, "Princess Changle. Shielding the crown prince like this, could it be that you're also involved in this rebellion?" I glanced at him coolly. "Wei Anming, wouldn't you benefit the most if the crown prince were deposed?" His face suddenly twisted with rage as he shrieked at me furiously. "Wei Qingtang, how dare you slander me like this? Oh, it seems I've hit a nerve, and now you're lashing out in shame. You." I abruptly stood up and walked toward the emperor under everyone's astonished gazes. "Father, may your daughter take a closer look at that jade pendant." I picked up the jade pendant from the ground, pretending to examine it carefully, then suddenly laughed. "The craftsmanship of this imitation is quite exquisite." Fu Mingtang's expression darkened, his eyes clouded with unreadable emotions. Wei Anming burst into laughter. "Wei Qingtang, stop your futile resistance. Confess your crimes now, and I may beg His Majesty for mercy, granting you and your sister the dignity of intact corpses." The emperor's eyes flickered slightly. "Changle, what do you mean by this?" I retrieved another jade pendant from my sleeve and raised it high. This is the true crown prince's coiled dragon pendant." Instantly, everyone present froze in shock, while Fu Mingtang's face turned deathly pale. I presented it to the emperor with both hands. "May your Majesty discern the truth." The 2 jade pendants shimmered with a gentle luster under the sunlight, their patterns nearly identical. Yet upon closer inspection, the one presented by Fu Mingtang had slightly dull dragon eyes, while the one in my hand boasted intricate and fluid dragon scale patterns, its jade surface as smooth and radiant as fine fat. The naturally formed fibrous patterns in the dragon's eyes were clearly visible. This was the true imperial heirloom. The emperor took both pendants and carefully compared them, his expression gradually shifting. Fu Mingtang's pupils constricted abruptly as he stared at me. A flicker of disbelieving panic flashing in his eyes, I let out a cold laugh, my voice clear and sharp. "I wonder what punishment General Fu deserves for counterfeiting the crown prince's jade pendant, framing others, and plotting rebellion." Fu Mingtang's face turned ashen as he barked sharply, "Preposterous. This subject has guarded the border for years. My loyalty to the throne is as clear as heaven and earth." Before I could retort, Wei Yochi had already bowed slowly. His voice steady and forceful. "Imperial father, your son has an impeachment to present." The emperor's gaze darkened as it settled on him. Speak. Wei Yochi raised his eyes, his gaze sharp as a blade, directly pointing at Fu Mingtang. This subject wishes to impeach General Fu Mingtang of the Biaoqi army for forming cliques for personal gain, forging the crown prince's tokens, attempting to frame the heir apparent, supporting Wei Anming's ascension, and plotting treason and usurpation. You, slanderous accusations. Fu Mingtang erupted in fury, veins bulging at his temples. Wei Yochi sneered and waved his hand. Bring them forward. Several imperial guards escorted a group of tightly bound generals, precisely the deputy commanders of the Shirozhou army. The moment they saw the emperor, they immediately knelt and kowtowed, trembling as they pleaded, "Your Majesty, spare our lives." It was General Fu who ordered us to disguise ourselves as imperial guards and frame the crown prince for rebellion. Fu Mingtang's evidence of guilt had long been gathered by Wei Yochi. Now that they confessed, I granted them an outcome that wouldn't implicate their wives and children. Knowing Fu Mingtang's downfall was inevitable, they had no choice but to strike this deal with me. Nonsense, Fu Mingtang roared, his eyes blazing with murderous intent. Your Majesty, this is the crown prince's fabrication. Wei Yochi remained composed, retrieving a stack of secret letters from his sleeve and presenting them with both hands. Father, these are Fu Mingtang's secret correspondences with the generals of Shirozhou. They clearly state his plan to forge evidence of the crown prince's rebellion during the ancestral rites ceremony, seize the opportunity to depose the heir, and install Wei Anming instead. The emperor took the secret letter, his expression growing darker with each line he read, until he suddenly hurled it at Fu Mingtang. Fu Mingtang, what do you have to say for yourself? Fu Mingtang's face turned deathly pale as he staggered back a step, fear finally surfacing in his eyes. He abruptly turned his head, his gaze searching the crowd for Wei Anming as if seeking help, only to find Wei already pale-faced, stealthily retreating in an attempt to flee. Ha! I let out a cold laugh and raised my voice. Wei Anming, you think you can run? I immediately drew my sword and thrust it fiercely into his leg. With a scream, he staggered and fell to the ground. The imperial guards swiftly stepped forward and pinned Wei Anming down, struggling to lift his head, his eyes filled with venom. He spat. You framed me. Framed. Wei Yochi's gaze turned icy as he raised his hand again and commanded, bring forth another witness. A eunuch was brought forward, none other than the trusted attendant by Wei Anming's side. Trembling as he knelt, his voice quivered. Your Majesty, this servant witnessed with his own eyes Prince Anming conspiring with General Fu. They planned to eliminate the crown prince during the ancestral rites ceremony, then force your Majesty to abdicate. Wei Anming's eyes nearly burst from their sockets as he lunged to strangle the eunuch, only to be restrained firmly by the imperial guards. Fu Mingtang's face turned ashen as he finally realized the game was lost. Slowly raising his head, he looked at me, his eyes revealing a twisted hint of amusement. Wei Qingtang, you've won. The emperor, furious beyond measure, shouted sternly, guards, take Fu Mingtang and Wei Anming to the imperial prison. Let the 3 judicial officers conduct a joint trial and punish them severely. Yes, the imperial guards responded in unison and stepped forward to seize the men. After Fu Mingtang and Wei Anming were dragged away, the emperor wearily rubbed his temples and turned his gaze to Wei Yochi. Crown Prince, we wronged you. Wei Yochi kowtowed deeply. This unworthy son dares not resent your Majesty. I only beg to purge the court of treacherous elements and restore purity to our Wei state. I stood to the side, watching my younger brother kneeling on the ground, and at last, a long-lost sense of satisfaction welled up in my heart. In this lifetime, we have finally turned fate around. Fu Mingtang, your retribution has only just begun. One by one, Fu Mingtang's crimes were being uncovered, forming cliques for personal gain, forging military orders, framing the crown prince, plotting rebellion. Each of these crimes warranted the extermination of 9 generations. The emperor, in his fury, wielded the vermilion brush and decreed the harshest punishments. Fu Mingtang, to be torn apart by 5 horses. Wei Anming, immediate execution. Wei Yochi and I knelt before the hall, kowtowing in gratitude. We thank your Majesty for your discerning judgment, clearing our names. The emperor wearily waved his hand. Go now. After today, this matter will be concluded. Wei Yochi and I exchanged glances, sharing a knowing smile. Dark clouds blotted out the sun above the execution ground. Standing atop the city gate tower, Wei Yochi and I looked down at Fu Mingtang, bound tightly at the center of the execution ground. His limbs and neck were tightly bound with thick reins, 5 spirited horses poised and ready. Waiting only for the executioner's command at the stroke of noon, outside the execution ground, the common folk hurled rotten vegetables and rotten eggs at Fu Mingtang, cursing incessantly. Traitor, drop dead, what kind of damn general is he? Pa, Fu, you treacherous dog, framing the crown prince and princess, this is your retribution. Fu Mingtang raised his head, his gaze piercing through the crowd to lock onto me. I let out a cold laugh and declared loudly, Fu Mingtang, did you ever imagine this day would come? His face was deathly pale, his lips parched, yet he clung stubbornly to his last shred of pride. Wei Qingtang, do you truly hate me this much? What else? I looked at him contemptuously. Why? His voice was hoarse, and a glimmer of moisture actually appeared in his eyes. Why have you become so cruel? You weren't like this before. I once treated you with sincerity. Sincerity. I burst into laughter. Your sincerity is like dirt to me, utterly worthless, even utterly disgusting. Fu Mingtang shuddered violently, the false tenderness in his eyes shattering instantly, replaced by twisted hatred. Wei Qingtang. I slowly raised my hand and enunciated each word clearly. The hour has come, carry out the execution. As the execution token hit the ground, the coachman cracked his whip with full force. The horses neighed in unison and bolted forward. Fu Mingtang finally showed fear. He struggled desperately, howling, no, Atang, Princess Changle, spare me, I beg you, save me. His pleas were shrill and piercing, yet all I felt was an indescribable exhilaration. In my previous life, Wei Yochi and I stood on this very city tower, but at that time, Fu Mingtang held Wei Ruoshi in his arms below the tower, watching coldly as I was cursed by the masses, forcing me to leap to my death to prove my innocence. Today, standing in the same spot, the circumstances couldn't be more different. Heaven has eyes. This is retribution. Don't look, sister. Wei Yochi suddenly covered my eyes from behind, his warm palm blocking my view as his voice whispered low in my ear. Don't let such filth taint your sight. I paused slightly, then chuckled lightly. All right. The thunderous galloping of hooves and Fu Mingtang's heart-wrenching cries intertwined in my ears. Never had I felt such exhilaration. Before long, Fu Mingtang's voice gradually weakened, eventually fading into complete silence, and just then, the previously overcast sky suddenly cleared. A dazzling beam of sunlight piercing through the clouds to shine directly upon me, bringing long-awaited warmth. I stared blankly at that beam of light, my eyes suddenly reddening, my voice trembled slightly. Yochi, truth be told, I live in fear every day, afraid that all this is just a dream on our road to the underworld. Wei Yochi abruptly pulled me into his embrace. His chest was warm and solid, his heartbeat clear and audible, making me know beyond doubt that this was no dream. It's not a dream, Ajia, he said hoarsely, with unshakable determination. In this lifetime, I will protect you well, and never let you suffer again. I leaned into his embrace and smiled with relief, saying, all right. When I stepped into Wei Ruoshi's bedchamber, the room was in complete disarray. Shattered porcelain cups were scattered across the floor, and the gauze curtains had been torn to shreds. Wei Ruoshi was curled up in a corner, her hair disheveled, clutching a golden hairpin so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Get out, she suddenly looked up, her eyes bloodshot, her voice hoarse, or I'll kill you. I sneered and slowly stepped closer. Wei Ruoshi, the way you look now is even more pitiful than a stray dog. It's you, it's all your fault, she shrieked, lunging at me with a golden hairpin aimed straight at my heart. I grabbed her wrist and twisted it hard. Ah, she cried out in pain as the hairpin clattered to the ground. Useless. I snorted coldly, flinging her to the ground. She was frighteningly thin, light as a withered leaf, making no sound when she fell. What are you here for? To laugh at me? I haven't the leisure for this. I raised my hand in signal, and a maidservant behind me stepped forward bearing a vermilion-lacquered wooden box. I've come to deliver your wedding gown. The lid was lifted, revealing an opulent crimson bridal robe embroidered with golden phoenixes. Yet Wei Ruoshi recoiled violently as if confronted by a venomous serpent. No, I won't go to that political marriage. I'd rather die. You've no choice in the matter. I looked down at her imperiously. Fu Mingtang is dead. Wei Anming executed. Do you truly believe any alternatives remain? She trembled all over, suddenly crawling over to clutch at the hem of my skirt. Princess Changle, sister, I beg you, those people from the enemy country are beasts. They'll torture me to death. I bent down, gripping her chin forcefully and forcing her to meet my gaze. Wei Ruoshi, now you're afraid. When you and Fu Mingtang schemed to send me off for a political marriage, did you ever consider what I might endure? Her pupils contracted sharply, her lips quivering. but not a single word escaped them. I released her, leisurely wiping my fingertips with a handkerchief. Destroying the enemy country will take at least 3 years. During that time, a political marriage is the best way to halt hostilities, just as you once arranged for me. With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me came her heart-wrenching screams. Wei Qingtang, you'll get your retribution. I'll haunt you even as a ghost. Retribution, I've already suffered it. The day of the marriage alliance, the sky was oppressively gloomy. I stood atop the city wall, watching the grand procession gradually disappear into the distance. Wei Ruoshi, clad in that resplendent wedding dress, was forcibly shoved into the phoenix carriage. Her cries could be heard from afar. This should have been my moment of greatest triumph, but when the troop became a mere black dot in the distance, my heart felt hollow, devoid of the triumphant satisfaction I had imagined revenge would bring. It wasn't until that troop completely vanished beyond the horizon that I suddenly understood. My sorrow wasn't for Wei Ruoshi alone, but for all those women sent away as brides for political alliances throughout the centuries, for women like me, traveling alone to foreign lands, struggling to survive in hostile territories, those treated as political bargaining chips, trapped forever in gilded cages, those dismissed with a single brushstroke in history books, deemed unworthy even of having their names recorded. I understand their fear, their humiliation, their blood and tears. What are you thinking about, sister? A familiar voice sounded by my ear. Wei Yochi had appeared at my side without me noticing. Gazing at the distant, overcast horizon, I murmured softly, I was just wondering when we'll finally see an era where women no longer have to be offered as brides to stop wars. He fell silent for a moment, then suddenly turned to look at me. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, falling upon his deep-set eyes and brows. Those eyes shone startlingly bright. We will wait for it. He reached out and gently grasped my ice-cold fingers. Elder sister, will you join me in creating such a golden age? The wind rolled up the banners atop the city walls as distant horn calls echoed from afar. I grasped his hand in return and nodded slowly. All right, this time. What we aim to change is not just our own fate. The second story, after my fiancé passed away, I married his elder brother. Xie was cold and abstinent until he was drugged, and we finally consummated our marriage. I realized he wasn't cold under the bed curtains. Later, Xie didn't die and even returned with a female physician. He said he couldn't wrong her again in this lifetime and would take her as his equal wife. I felt somewhat puzzled and was about to explain, yet he looked at the swaddled child and smiled. Lirong, is this the child you adopted for me from the collateral branch? The baby whimpered a few times, and the wet nurse quickly stepped forward, carrying him out of the room to stroll in the courtyard. I felt somewhat awkward and was about to say no, but Xie interrupted me. Lirong, I know these years you've been married to a spirit tablet, enduring cold stares. You've truly suffered. Rest assured, from now on, I will treat you well. He's been feigning death for 3 whole years. How could he possibly know I nearly married a spirit tablet back then? But you must agree to let me take a Dai as my second wife, otherwise I'll leave the Xie residence. His words were unusually resolute, leaving me utterly bewildered. The physician Xie Chehua standing behind him also quickly knelt down, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes, looking pitifully delicate. Madam, please forgive me. Your humble daughter has long admired the general. Even if it means becoming a concubine, I would be willing, as long as I can be with him. Xie hurriedly helped her up, his eyes filled with heartache. A Dai, don't belittle yourself like this. I've told you before, I will never fail you again in this lifetime. I will marry you as my wife. Watching the two of them reluctant to part, I could only clear my throat and force a smile. It's good that you're back. As for your marriage with Miss Zheng, we'll need to consult mother before discussing further. Xie seemed much more at ease. After all, Mother Xie had always doted on her youngest son the most. If he wanted something, even the stars in the sky, she would try her best to pluck one for him. Suddenly, he reached out and tightly grasped my wrist. Lirong, rest assured, I will treat that adopted child as my own flesh and blood. Never again. I frowned. Xie, what nonsense are you talking? Let go. His grip tightened relentlessly, and I couldn't break free. At that moment, a clear and deep voice came from the doorway. Warm as a spring breeze yet carrying a hint of chill. Second brother has returned. It was Xie. Why did he leave work so early today? Taking advantage of Xie's momentary distraction, I quickly broke free from him and hid my hands in my sleeves. Xie frowned slightly, visibly displeased. This is Lirong's room. What brings you here, elder brother? Xie's face was as fair as jade, with a narrow waist and broad shoulders. The official robe he wore added an air of authority to his demeanor. The corners of his lips lifted slightly as he looked at me. "Lirong, why aren't you coming over quickly?" I hurried over and stood by his side. Xie Huai reached out to pull me, but Adai suddenly felt dizzy and seemed unsteady on her feet. He quickly went to support Adai beside him. Full of concern, Xie Che finally smiled, though there was no warmth in his eyes. "Second brother. You returned home too late and didn't know I've already married." Xie Huai was momentarily stunned, but then he too began to smile. "Is that so? In that case, congratulations to you, elder brother." He cupped his hands in salute, adopting the respectful demeanor of a younger brother. "Where might my sister-in-law be? I returned in haste today and have yet to pay my respects to her." Xie Che looked at me with a gentle expression. "Lirong, second brother greets you," feeling somewhat embarrassed. I could only extend my hand in a symbolic gesture of assistance. "There's no need for such formalities, second brother, we're all family." Xie Huai was stunned, suddenly raising his head as his eyes gradually turned red. "Sister-in-law, Lirong, how could this happen?" Xie Che rested his hands on my shoulders, his smile tender and lingering. "Second brother, it's getting late, haven't you gone to pay respects to mother yet?" After learning of Xie Huai's death, his mother had been despondent for a long time, retreating to her room day and night to eat vegetarian meals and chant Buddhist scriptures, saying she would guide him to become a Buddha. To everyone's astonishment, not only was Xie Huai alive, but he also returned with a beautiful bride. Overwhelmed with joy, she wept uncontrollably while caressing Xie Huai's face. "My son, my poor, unfortunate son." Her eyes had always been set on Xie Huai, back when Xie Huai was presumed dead. It was she who pressured the Jiang family, forcing me to marry into the Xie household. She wanted me to marry Xie Huai's memorial tablet and remain chaste for him. Xie Huai and I grew up together, and there was even a marriage arrangement made by our grandfathers, but before Xie Huai went off to war, she never thought me worthy. Determined to find him a noblewoman from a more prestigious family, she said I came from humble origins and wasn't presentable. Yet Xie Huai was smitten with me. To see me, he repeatedly got himself grounded, even scaling walls to keep our dates. In the end, he took a nasty spill, pitifully covering his face, too embarrassed to look at me. "Lirong, I think I've ruined my looks. Will you still want me?" I suppressed a laugh and brushed his hand away. Where did this handsome young gentleman come from? He's acting like a shy maiden, so bashful. His face turned red. You're making fun of me." I handed him the brocade pouch I had embroidered for days and nights before picking up the book of songs. I cleared my throat and pretended to recite poetry nearby. "Cold and dreary the wind and rain, the cock crows and crows again, but I have seen my lord again. Why should I any more complain? The wind whistles and the rain patters. The cock crows without stop, but I have seen my lord again. How can my ailment not drop? The wind and rain darken the sky, yet the cock crows without cease. Since I have seen my lord, how can I not be glad?" Xie Huai finally smiled, carefully fastening the brocade pouch at his waist. "Lirong, these 2 ducks you embroidered are truly beautiful. How did you know I particularly enjoy eating duck? Would you prefer roast duck, braised duck, stewed duck, or white-cut duck?" "You're so blind, these are clearly mandarin ducks." Angry, I turned and walked away, but he chased after me. "Lirong, don't go, wait for me." Xie Huai, you. Don't come any closer." The words hadn't even left my lips when I jolted awake from the dream, my heart pounding like thunder. What startled me even more was Xie Che, still awake, sitting beside me with his gaze lowered in my direction. The candlelight was dim, and feeling somewhat guilty, I quickly spoke up. "Whose husband? Why aren't you asleep yet?" Xie Che's white robes made his strikingly handsome face appear even more peerless, surpassing even the youthful beauty of Xie Huai in his prime. I shook my head slightly, sighing inwardly about how beauty could truly lead one astray. Xie Che rubbed his temples, looking somewhat melancholy. "Lirong, can you still not let go of second brother?" My heart clenched at his words, and I quickly shook my head. "I am already Ninga's mother, and second brother has found his sweetheart." But he suddenly lifted my chin, his gaze as deep as an ancient well. "Lirong, you shouldn't answer so quickly." I ignore the faint ache in my heart. Like the lingering dampness of a rainy day, the love of youth was too intense. I once promised Xie Huai I would wait for him before he went off to war, and after learning of his death, I cried countless days and nights, willing to marry even his memorial tablet. Later, when the Jiang family fell into misfortune, my father was imprisoned, and my brother ran around in desperation, yet no one could be found to help. The rain was pouring heavily that day when Xie Che arrived holding an umbrella. He said there was indeed a marriage arrangement between the Xie and Jiang families, but the Xie family didn't have just one son. To save the Jiang family, wouldn't a living person be more useful than a dead one? What does Miss Jiang think? I looked up at this favored minister of the emperor. With his bright future ahead, marrying a noblewoman would only add wings to a tiger, propelling him to greater heights. My humble status offers no advantage to your lordship's career. Yet he took a sip of tea, gazing calmly at the drizzling rain outside. His Majesty wishes to select a royal consort. I have no intention of marrying the princess, only my prearranged engagement can spare me this trouble without committing treason. You needn't worry, Miss Jiang, between us, this is merely a transaction. I had no choice. To save my father, I had to change my mind. Instead of marrying Xie Huai's memorial tablet, I would marry Xie Che. Moonlight streamed like silk. Seeing my silence, Xie Che's gaze held a trace of hurt. Wife, why have you fallen silent? I sighed. You're overthinking, my lord. The unfinished words were swallowed by his kiss as he deepened it, leaving me nearly breathless. Only after what felt like an eternity did his lips part from mine. I leaned against his chest, panting heavily. My heart raced like a startled deer, my face burning crimson. Just as I was about to protest, he turned that flawless jade-like face toward me again. My anger dissipated uncontrollably, much to my chagrin. His eyes twinkled with amusement. My lady, tonight is the 15th. Dizzy and dazed, I couldn't help but feel my face grow warm. Xie Che appeared aloof and ascetic on the surface, and I had thought him celestial, devoid of such earthly desires. Little did I know that some people's appearances could be deceiving. I pushed him away, somewhat afraid. Husband, my lord, perhaps we should discuss this another day. I'm rather tired today. Ever since giving birth to Ninga, we hadn't been intimate for a long time, and he never brought it up himself. Why was he acting so unusually today? He smiled and said all right, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief, but failed to notice the gloom lurking in his eyes. I slept especially deeply this time. When I woke up, my back ached terribly. It felt as if I'd been run over by a cart. With every inch of my body sore. Madam, someone requests an audience. Rubbing my back, I was about to say I wouldn't see anyone, but the maid added, Miss Adai said she would rather die than not see Madam. Frightened, I quickly invited Zheng Yundai inside. She was now the woman closest to Xie Huai's heart. It wouldn't do if anything happened to her. Miss Adai, is there something urgent? Yet the moment she saw me, she immediately knelt down and began kowtowing repeatedly before me. If Madam dislikes me, punish Adai however you wish, but the child in Adai's womb is innocent. I beg Madam to show mercy and spare him. I was utterly confused and quickly helped her up. Miss Adai, there must be some misunderstanding. I didn't know you were with child. How could I possibly harm you? Someone, fetch a physician at once. But Adele knelt on the ground, desperately pressing her hands against the unborn child in her womb. Her face was pale, and a trace of blood stained the corner of her mouth. Young madam, please let me go. Just then, Xie Huai quickly walked over. He scooped Adele into his arms, his eyes filled with resentment as he looked at me. Lirong, how could you be so cruel? Adai has done you no wrong now. Why won't you spare this defenseless woman? Adai nestled in his arms, weeping like a pear blossom bathed in rain, her pitiable appearance tugging at heartstrings. General, it's all Adai's fault for angering elder sister. Please don't blame her. I was left speechless. You're right, I bear her no grudge, so why would I make things difficult for her? Xie Huai declared with conviction. Lirong, if you must hate someone, hate me. Why harm Adai? He placed Aid in the chair, his eyes filled with anguish. Aid is carrying my child, but the child is innocent. I laughed in exasperation. Second brother, you've misunderstood. I had no idea she was pregnant. Even if she were, it would be a blessing for the Xie family. Why would I harm her? But Xie Huai stared straight at me, his gaze brimming with certainty. Because your body is damaged, it's fundamentally impossible for you to conceive in this lifetime. I suspect he might have suffered brain damage after going to the battlefield. What nonsense are you spouting? Second brother, Ninga is my own flesh and blood. Yet he only responded with a cold laugh, his eyes filled with mockery. What flesh and blood? It's nothing but a scheme of deception. Do you think adopting a child from the collateral line would go unnoticed? I could bear it no longer and raised my hand to slap him, but he abruptly seized my wrist. He looked at me, his eyes filled with profound sorrow. Lirong, you weren't like this in your past life. You loved me so deeply that you were willing to marry my memorial tablet even after my death. You knew I would return. How could you marry someone else? What nonsense about past lives and present days. The more I listened, the angrier I grew. Has second brother been struck in the head on the battlefield? What madness are you spouting? Yet he laughed, his eyes rimmed with red. Lirong, stop pretending, you clearly don't love eldest brother. Did you marry him just to spite me? Xie Huai, you're talking nonsense and showing no respect for your elder sister-in-law. This is absolutely outrageous. Overcome with rage, I quickly raised my other hand, the one not restrained, and slapped him across the face. The quiet hall echoed with the sharp sound of the slap, and Xie Huai's cheek immediately flushed red, yet the curve of his lips only grew more pronounced. Lirong, what are you afraid of? That big brother will find out he's just my substitute. At that moment, Mrs. Xie hurried over in distress. My son, heartbroken to see Xie Huai being slapped by me, she scolded me harshly. You heartless woman. How dare you treat Huaya and his flesh and blood like this? I'll have Chea write a letter of divorce this instant and cast you out. I couldn't help but laugh. I am my husband's lawfully wedded wife, bound to obey him in all things. If you wish to divorce me, mother, perhaps you should first ask my husband's opinion. Xie Che had left for the morning court assembly and wouldn't be back for quite some time. Xie Huai looked at me with complex emotions in his eyes. There was confusion, pain, and deep resentment. Lirong, when did you become so obedient to eldest brother? The way you treated me before was never like this. I used to be stubborn and spoke without restraint. In the golden days of childhood, when laughter and chatter filled the air, I loved shouting into Xie Huai's ear. Once married, you must obey your wife, Xie Huai. You'll have to listen to me from now on. But after marrying Xie Che, with whom I was never close to begin with, fear overwhelmed me. How could I dare utter such words? Lady Xie grew even angrier. She ordered me confined to the prayer hall, withholding meals, forcing me to kneel before the Buddha, copying scriptures as penance. I sighed, suddenly realizing I had indeed acted impulsively. On our wedding night, Xie Che and I had made vows to each other. He would help me clear my father's name, I would manage his household affairs. We agreed to treat each other with respect, even going so far as to not consummate our marriage for over half a year. I had always thought him to be an ascetic saint until Xie Che was drugged with a potent aphrodisiac by the princess. When he staggered back to his residence, barely holding himself together, I was in the midst of bathing. Yet, bound by propriety, he waited outside without a word, refusing to intrude. Under the moonlight, pale as silk, I emerged in my night robe, hair still damp, only to find him radiating an unsettling aura. It was then that he finally looked at me, his eyes rimmed red, his devastatingly handsome face now bewitchingly demonic. Lirong, help me, a fleeting indulgence in pleasure. Though spring's chill lingered, within the bed curtains unfolded a scene of boundless springtime passion. I had never imagined consummation could last so long. His hands gripped my waist with such force they left blue and purple bruises in their wake. I was like a fish on a chopping board, flipped and tossed, fried, steamed, and stir-fried in every conceivable way. When I could bear it no longer, I finally broke down in tears. Enough already, if this goes on, I'll die. Yet he simply smiled radiantly, gripping my ankle with eyes full of obsession. His tall nose bridge grazed my calf, making me tremble uncontrollably, though I tried to shake off his hand. He seized it once more. Be good, just this last time. Crabapple blossoms fall in wind and rain, countless petals stir pity in whose heart. I couldn't tell day from night, only vaguely remembering that even my meals were fed to me in bed by Xie Che, spoonful by spoonful at first, then mouthful by mouthful later. I drifted in and out of sleep for a full day and night. When I awoke, I saw the ever-proper Xie Che sitting by my bedside. His expression remained unchanged, yet his eyes brimmed with tender affection. You've worked hard, Lirong. He seemed to carry a hint of guilt in his tone. I quickly waved my hand. It's all right. It's all because of that medicine. It was too potent. You've worked hard too. After regaining consciousness, Xie Che seemed to have returned to his usual cold and abstinent demeanor. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I never could have imagined. This was merely the beginning, nothing more than an insignificant appetizer. After that, Xie Che became even more excessive in his actions. His behavior made me recall our wedding night with nothing but sighs. How could he be even more intense without taking the medicine than with it? Could that medicine have been fake, drowsy in spring, weary in autumn, napping in summer? I grew weary from copying scriptures and couldn't help but doze off at my desk, drifting into a hazy dream amidst my drowsiness. The heavy scent of sandalwood enveloped me, as if someone buried their face against my neck, their warm breath brushing against my cheek. They murmured something in my ear. Though I couldn't discern the words, a hand slowly traced along my cheek, lingering as if reluctant to leave, then glided toward the corner of my lips. Lirong, do you hate me now, today? I couldn't move, only feeling utterly miserable. Who was speaking? It sounded so familiar, yet I couldn't recall no matter how hard I tried. He chuckled to himself and kissed my lips, deepening the embrace step by step. Even if you hate me with all your might, I will never regret this. By the time I awoke, the scripture had already been copied in full. I looked at the scroll, it was indeed my handwriting, yet I distinctly remembered that more than half of the latter volume remained unfinished. Could it be that I was too drowsy and misremembered? In the dream, I seemed to have even bitten that person's lower lip. Could it be because it's been too long since we've been intimate? Making me unable to resist such a desperate dream. How absurd. I rubbed my temples, only to hear the maid calling me out of my room, saying the eldest young master had returned. I glanced at the sky, feeling that Xie Che had returned later than usual tonight. Just as I stepped outside, I saw Xie Huai. According to the maid, he seemed to have quarreled with Adai too and was now wandering under the corridor, refusing to go back to his room no matter what. I was about to step past him when I noticed a split beneath his lip. It looked like someone had bitten him. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. Who could have bitten him? Then I remembered the nearly identical handwriting in the scripture. If I didn't write it, then who did? After all, Xie Huai's handwriting and mine have been strikingly similar since childhood. The reason was simple: we were both young and mischievous, often getting punished by our elders with copying texts whenever we misbehaved. When Xie Huai was punished, I'd copy for him. When I was punished, he'd copy for me. Through thick and thin, we share both hardship and fortune. Yet back then, I never imagined that no matter how many years of childhood friendship we'd shared, it wouldn't prevent him from swiftly transferring his affections to another woman, one as pure and innocent as a white lotus. Xie Huai stopped me, saying he wanted to have a proper talk. I looked at his lips, my heart equally puzzled, and agreed to his request. Pavilions, terraces, and towers. Xie Huai walked ahead of me, then suddenly turned around. I nearly collided with his chest, startling me so much I could barely keep my balance. He quickly reached out to steady me, but I dodged his hand in haste, seeing me avoid him like this. Xie Huai's tone carried a hint of bitterness. Lirong, have we really grown so distant between us? I rubbed my temples, utterly exhausted in body and mind. Second brother, mind your words, now I am your sister-in-law. By both sentiment and propriety, you should no longer address me by my given name. He suddenly laughed, his laughter filled with bitterness. At this point, are you still going to say you haven't been reborn? My hand involuntarily paused. Rebirth, this was a concept frequently mentioned in the most popular storybooks circulating in the capital lately. Rebirth is nothing but a bizarre fantasy. Second brother, you must learn to distinguish between reality and imagination. Could it be that Xie Huai has read too many storybooks and lost track of time? I stared at his lower lip for a long time, and the more I looked, the more it seemed to have been bitten. Just as I finally decided to ask him how exactly he got it, Xie Huai spoke first. He gazed at the pavilion not far away and said slowly, Lirong, in our past life, we could have lived happily together. Through Xie Huai's narration, I finally caught a glimpse of what he called our past life. He said that in our previous life, I had resolutely married his memorial tablet and lived as his widow for over 3 years. The clan took pity on me, a lonely widow with no one to rely on, and arranged for me to adopt a child from a collateral branch. Later, Xie Huai returned, bringing with him Ada, the female physician who had saved his life. I was stubborn by nature and adamantly refused to let Ada enter our household, even though Xie Huai repeatedly assured me that he harbored no romantic feelings for Ada, only wishing to acknowledge her as a younger sister to repay her life-saving kindness. Yet even Xie Che, who was already a close minister to the emperor at the time, spoke up for me. Saying Adai's identity was unclear and she couldn't casually enter the Xie residence, Xie Huai had no other choice but to arrange separate lodgings for Adai, keeping her outside the household. Xie Huai and I were married for a full year, yet I failed to conceive a child. He summoned imperial physicians to examine me, only to learn I was born barren, a stone woman incapable of pregnancy. Mother Xie was frantic, running everywhere to find a prestigious match for Xie Huai, who had already achieved fame and success. Yet unexpectedly, Xie Huai had only Adai in his heart at this moment and was determined to marry her. When I refused, he threatened me with the Jiang family, forcing my hand. Left with no choice, I relented and agreed to let her become his concubine. Xie Huai said I treated Adai terribly on the tea-serving day. I refused to accept the hot tea she offered, publicly splashed her new wedding dress, bluntly accused her of illicit relations without proper matchmaking, and called Xie Huai disloyal and dishonorable. Not long after, Adai became pregnant. While the whole family rejoiced, I grew mad with jealousy. Not only did I claim the child wasn't his, but I repeatedly framed a die, nearly causing her to miscarry. As Xie Huai spoke these words, his face was filled with resentment. Lirong, we've known each other since childhood all these years. You've always been understanding, how could you be so intolerant of a mere physician's daughter? He sighed and looked at me, his eyes brimming with grievance. She's just my savior, that's all. She's been alone and helpless since childhood. I merely wanted to give her a complete family. I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. Second brother's words are quite amusing, though I don't understand them. Since you pity her so, I shall wish you success in your endeavors. I blame myself for misjudging his character in my youth. I actually thought Xie Huai was someone worth entrusting my life to. Thank heavens I never married him, or I'd be the one feeling disgusted now. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. He looked somewhat flustered. Lirong, I know you have feelings for me. Marrying eldest brother was just using him as a substitute. All the past lives are over in this life. Let's start anew. Xie Chei's voice came from afar. If second brother has something to say, speak plainly to me. Let's not disturb my wife with talk of gods and ghosts. Xie Chei walked to my side and took my hand. His eyes brimmed with tenderness. Lirong, I've come too late. Under the banana tree, shadows loom thick and heavy. I suddenly had the illusion of being caught meeting a secret lover, feeling somewhat guilty despite myself. Husband, it's not what you think between me and your younger brother. But Xie Huai went completely mad. No. Big brother, Lirong and I are exactly what you think. I was utterly speechless. Xie Huai, if you want to die, just die alone. Okay, why drag me down with you? But Xie Chei gently placed his hand on my waist, his eyes flashing with ruthlessness as he looked at Xie Huai. You worry too much, second brother. One is my own brother, the other is my beloved wife. How could I possibly misunderstand you two? When we returned to the room, Ninga had just woken up. The wet nurse was coaxing him by the side and quickly withdrew upon seeing us arrive. Xie Chei's expression remained unchanged, giving no indication whether he was angry or not. I felt somewhat timid and didn't dare look at him again, quickly turning to pick up the child instead. Little Ninga lay quietly in my arms, neither crying nor fussing, but instead giggling sweetly. His fair, tender little face looked utterly adorable. The more I looked at him, the more my heart swelled with tenderness. Such a precious child was actually born from me. I must be truly remarkable. I'll just take Xie Huai's words this afternoon as nonsense. Someone who's already irrelevant to me shouldn't be affecting my mood. Thinking this, my spirits gradually lifted, and I made funny faces to amuse Ninga. He was quite appreciative too, giggling non-stop. Yet the air pressure around me grew increasingly oppressive, the atmosphere more and more suffocating. Xie Chei's deep voice came through. Lirong. I had no choice but to turn my head and force a smile. My dear husband, what's wrong? I had thought he was going to reprimand me, but instead he took me by the shoulders and drew me into his embrace. It's all my fault for letting you suffer this injustice. So he was apologizing for Lady Xie punishing me by making me copy Buddhist scriptures this afternoon. I quickly shook my head. It's nothing, my lord, in the candlelight. His features were as exquisite as a painting as he reached out to brush the hair from my forehead. Mother is getting on in years. I've already arranged for her to be sent back to the manor to rest properly. His hand slowly combed through every strand of my hair, a faint smile lingering in his eyes. Lirong, don't worry. From now on, no one will disturb us anymore. Though his words were spoken with utmost gentleness, for some reason, a sudden chill rose in my heart. Just as I was about to lower my head, I abruptly noticed that Xie Chei's lower lip was unexpectedly slightly swollen. How strange. Did he eat chili peppers tonight? After Lady Xie left, the matter of Xie Huai and Adai's marriage fell entirely into my hands. Although I've managed the Xie household's affairs for 3 years, this is my first time personally arranging a wedding. I'm more than a little nervous, even to the point of forgetting to eat and sleep, because of this. I almost missed the day of my union with Xie Chei. It wasn't until my maid reminded me that I suddenly realized. I hurriedly left the accounting room, wanting to rush back to bathe, but was suddenly pressed against the wall by a drunken Xie Huai, who covered my mouth. The smell of alcohol on him made my stomach churn uncontrollably. I regret it. Lirong, what could he possibly regret at this point? I've already sent out all the invitations, whether old family friends or newly influential figures. When they learned that General Xie was marrying not some noblewoman, but a battlefield medic who'd saved his life, they all praised him for his loyalty and righteousness. Now he says he regrets it. Isn't this just undermining our Xie family's reputation? His breath kept brushing against my face, and there were even glimmers of tears in the corners of his eyes. Lirong, I don't want to marry her. The one I want to marry, from beginning to end, has only ever been you. I wanted to speak and argue back, but he covered my mouth so tightly that all I could manage were muffled whimpers. Under the moonlight, he seemed to smile faintly, the other hand slowly brushed across my brows. Though I've been sleeping beside a die these days, the person I dream of every night is none other than you, Lirong. We've known each other for years. If not for my elder brother stealing you away, you should have been my wife. Let's run away together, shall we? I won't marry a die anymore, and I'll forgive what happened between you and elder brother. As long as you're willing to leave with me, I can give up everything. The more I listened, the angrier I became, until I couldn't help but bite his hand hard. I bit down until my mouth filled with the metallic taste of blood. At last, he slowly loosened his grip. I turned and ran, only to stumble into a cool embrace. It was Xie. I had no idea how long he'd been standing there, or how much he'd seen. Xie pulled me into his arms and took shelter in a narrow alley. Xie couldn't find me outside and suddenly grew anxious, running off into the distance. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief, but Xie grabbed my chin. He looked at my face, which under the moonlight appeared as coldly beautiful as an exiled immortal. Lirong, this is the third time. My heart skipped a beat. Xie's implication was, is this the third time I've secretly met with Xie? I hurriedly explained, no. I didn't expect to run into him either. Husband, please believe me. He slowly lowered his head, carefully scrutinizing every nuance of my expression. After a long while, she finally smiled faintly. You're my wedded wife, of course I trust you. His hand moved to my neck, and with a slight pressure, he drew me closer to him. Lirong, do you regret marrying me? The moonlight, clear as water, illuminated his exquisitely beautiful face, though it seemed tender as ever, beneath the surface. Turbulent currents surged. I dared not speak another word. To explain is to conceal, and to conceal is to confirm the truth. Actions speak louder than words. To prevent Xie from growing suspicious, I had no choice but to abruptly kiss his lips. I ravaged them repeatedly, forcing him to forget everything happening before his eyes. Xie quickly got into the rhythm, even turning passivity into initiative. He pressed me against the wall, kissing me for what felt like an eternity. By the time we came to our senses, both of us were disheveled. His collar was torn to shreds by my frantic hands, and his chest bore several scratch marks. I wasn't in much better shape either, with my collar half undone and my skirt crumpled beyond recognition. The thought of how wild we must have looked and the possibility of being seen by the servants made me burn with embarrassment. It's late, my lord, you should return early. I was about to leave when he suddenly scooped me up in his arms. A faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. My lady is right, the night is deep, and I shall return with you. And so began another sleepless night. When I awoke, the sun was already high in the sky. I rubbed my sore waist, feeling like my endurance had improved considerably. Xie seemed gentler last night than usual. Could it be because of that initiative kiss I gave him beneath the wall? I was utterly shocked. I never would have guessed that Xie, with his cool and aloof exterior, actually prefers women who take the initiative. I always thought he'd be drawn to refined, demure ladies from respectable families. Truly, appearances can be deceiving. The night stretches long, and remembering last night's events still makes my cheeks burn. Where did this seemingly aloof and celestial being learn so many tricks? He's even more skilled than the courtesans in pleasure houses. After getting up, I continued making arrangements for Xie's wedding. While inventorying usable items for the ceremony in the storeroom, my hand brushed against a carved wooden box, piercing my finger and drawing a drop of blood. A sudden sense of foreboding rose in her heart. At that moment, the wet nurse rushed in frantically. Madam, something terrible has happened. The young master is missing. Who could have taken Ninga? I was frantic with worry and quickly joined the household in searching everywhere, only to find a letter in the room. It explicitly named me, demanding that I go alone to Lingshan Temple without any attendants, or else Ninga would never be found again. My heart burned with anxiety, and I dared not gamble with Ninga's safety, so I slipped away unnoticed to the appointed place. But at the cliff's edge, I saw someone entirely unexpected. It was Zheng Yundai. Instead of staying properly at the Xie residence as the soon-to-be second madress, why did she kidnap Ninga? Seeing my arrival, Zheng Yundai smiled. She stood by the cliff's edge, holding the infant with one arm, yet her eyes were filled with nothing but hatred. Jiang Lirong, you're already married to Xie, so why are you still provoking Xie? These days, I've been avoiding Xie at every turn. How could I possibly seek him out on my own? I told her the truth, but she refused to believe me, gnashing her teeth as she said, If you hadn't deliberately provoked him, how could he bear to abandon me and even talk about calling off our engagement? It must be you. You threatened him, you forced him to do this. Suddenly, I found Zheng Yundai rather pitiable. Miss Adai, even if I once had feelings for Xie Huai, that was all in the past. Now I have a husband and a child. My husband treats me very well. How could I possibly betray him by falling for another man? Moreover, from every perspective, Xie Huai nowadays simply couldn't compare to Xie Che. I didn't voice the rest of my thoughts, but Zheng Yundai kept shaking her head desperately. Impossible. Impossible. His heart belongs to me alone. I couldn't comprehend her words, yet I worried about Ninga in her arms. I had no choice but to force myself to calm down and speak gently. Miss Adai, human hearts are fickle. Even if the sincerity of the moment is genuine, who's to say it won't change in the future? I slowly moved closer to her, reaching out to take Ninga from her arms, but she seemed lost in thought, murmuring to herself as if in a daze. No, it can't be. I clearly cast a love spell on him. He was supposed to remain loyal to me forever. It wasn't supposed to change. Just as I was about to take Ninga from her, she suddenly snapped back to awareness. Her eyes burned with pure hatred as she looked at me. It's you. This is all your fault. She pushed me hard with all her strength. As long as you're dead, Xie Huai will be mine. At that moment, I heard urgent voices in the distance. No, before I could even reach for Ninga, she pushed me down. I thought I was going to die, but when I woke up, I found myself in a cave. Someone was lighting a fire before me, dressed like the boy from my old dreams. I felt dazed and called out his name. Xie Huai, is that you? He turned his head. His once handsome face was now covered in bloody scratches from tree branches. Already disfigured, seeing me awake, he eagerly stepped forward. Lirong, you're finally awake. I tried to get up but realized my leg was twisted, hurting with every movement. Right now, I couldn't move at all. Did you save me? I looked at Xie Huai, my heart filled with countless complicated emotions. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have incurred Zheng Yundai's hatred. Yet if it weren't for him, I might not have been rescued either. Either way, I can't bring myself to like him anymore. Right now, what worries me most is the child. Is Ninga all right? He nodded with a smile. Rest assured, I've already sent someone to escort Ninga back to the residence. He's safe and sound. Nothing will happen to him. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then he continued. Lirong, I'm sorry, it's my fault you got involved. I suddenly remembered that right before we fell off the cliff, Zheng Yundai had mentioned poisoning him with a GU. Looking at it this way, he's quite pitiful too. Second brother, don't blame yourself. It's good to see someone's true colors early. You're still young, you'll surely meet someone you truly love in the future. But he let out a bitter laugh. I've already met her. But it seems I've already missed my chance. I pretended not to understand, dodging the subject with evasive words. Yet he walked right up to me and suddenly knelt down. Lirong, forgive me, give me another chance, please. It turned out that ever since Xie Huai confessed to me about his rebirth, he had been dreaming about his previous life every night. In that past life, he and Zheng Yundai were inseparable, their bond growing stronger each day, while he and I quarreled constantly. When the quarrels became unbearable, I finally asked for a divorce. He refused and even spouted nonsense. You were born a member of the Xie family, and you'll die a ghost of the Xie family. Xie Huai refused to let me leave, so I had no choice but to stay secluded in the inner chambers, but my health grew increasingly worse. Once, Zheng Yundai's son fell into the water, and they claimed it was pushed by the child I had adopted. The child was young and timid, repeatedly saying it wasn't him. Yet Xie Huai still flew into a rage and slapped him. See, those without blood ties are nothing but cursed spawn. I quickly stepped forward to shield the child. If you want to hit him, you'll have to go through me first. Xie Huai never trusted me or the child, and grew increasingly distant. He thought I was still sulking, until that New Year's Eve, when he was happily celebrating with Zheng Yundai and their 2 children. That's when the stumbling child came running to find him, kneeling on the ground, knocking my head until it bled, begging him to find me a doctor. His every word insisted I was at death's door. Xie Huai didn't believe it. He said I was the most vicious person. How could I die so easily? He drove that child away, privately thinking the child had poor character, harboring such malice as to curse his own adoptive mother to die. But he didn't know, I was truly on the verge of death back then. The persimmon tree in the courtyard bore fruit again, and suddenly he remembered how greedy I was as a child, how I loved the persimmons from this very tree. He climbed the tree, picking one after another, while Zheng Yundai's son clambered beneath the branches, also wanting to eat the persimmons, yet he didn't want to give away a single one. He found another excuse. These persimmons aren't ripe yet. They're still astringent and not tasty. Daddy will buy you sweet dried persimmon cakes instead. Okay, the child cheered with joy. When he finally went to see me after buying the persimmon cakes and carrying a basket of freshly picked persimmons, he found me having just breathed my last. The adopted child was wailing loudly beside me. Xie Huai broke down. He clung tightly to my lifeless body, refusing to accept that I had long been dead. Impossible. You must be lying to me. Lirong, stop joking around. All right, he made many vows that night. He was willing to do anything if only I could wake up. But it was all too late. Xie Huai went mad. He blamed everyone for my death, including Zheng Yundai and her 2 children. After learning that Zheng Yundai had cursed him, he killed her. And wouldn't even spare another glance at the 2 children she had borne for him. He poured all his energy into that stepson who shared no blood ties with him. When that child grew up and inherited the Xie family estate, the first thing he did was poison Xie Huai to death. Outwardly gentle as jade and refined in manners, that child harbored only one thought: to avenge me. Father, had you never returned, Mother wouldn't have died, lying paralyzed in bed. Xie Huai dreamed nightly of our youthful days together, carefree youths, unaware of how long a lifetime could be, yet pledged their lives to each other. At death's door, he smiled. If not for Zheng Yundai, would he and I have remained whole? If there were a next life, he would surely awaken early and never fall into the trap again. After dying with a smile, he woke once more. Upon rebirth, he only recalled the first half of his life. He remembered Zheng Yundai at her most aggrieved. Yet forgot he had been bewitched and forgot his remorse after my death. So, he met Zheng Yundai again and promised to give her a complete home. But he never expected that when he brought a Dai home, I had already married his elder brother and become his sister-in-law. After recounting their past life, Xie Huai urgently pleaded, Lirong, I've remembered everything now. In this lifetime, I won't repeat my mistakes like before. I was deceived too. Give me another chance, please. You've only been with Big Brother for 3 years. Can our years of affection really be so fragile? Xie Huai's words forced me to examine my feelings toward Xie Che. In the past, I merely regarded Xie Che as a business partner. But now, it seems different. He is not only the father of my child but also my husband. Though his temperament is cold, he's anything but cold in bed. Add to that his apparent expertise in the art of lovemaking, and even I have come to savor its pleasures. With a husband so handsome, devoted, and capable, it's truly hard not to fall in love. Seeing me remain silent for a long time, my face flickering through countless expressions, Xie Huai finally let out a self-deprecating laugh. I understand now. It's only been 3 years after all. I still can't compare to eldest brother. Just then, a noise came from outside the cave. Xie Che arrived. He strode into the cave, and when he saw me, his usually indifferent expression visibly relaxed with relief. The corners of his eyes grew moist. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his eyes brimming with the joy of having found what was lost. Lirong, are you okay? Seeing my injured leg, a flash of murderous intent crossed his eyes. I won't let anyone who hurts you get away with it. Later, Zheng Yundai was thrown into the imperial dungeon, and during interrogation, both of her legs were broken. After suffering a miscarriage in prison, she clamored to see Xie Huai, but he adamantly refused to meet her. When she realized Xie Huai had completely abandoned her, Zheng Yundai laughed hysterically, revealing another long-hidden truth before everyone. The truth was, the one who was truly infertile wasn't me, it was Xie Huai. Xie Huai was wounded in battle, sustaining an injury to his reproductive organs. Although Zheng Yundai provided timely treatment and it appeared to be healed on the surface, in reality, he was rendered impotent. In order to justify being with Xie Huai, Zheng Yundai had no choice but to seek out a group of strong and robust soldiers, hoping to conceive an heir as soon as possible. Thus, her child was not Xie Huai's biological offspring at all. After saying everything, Zheng Yundai leaned against the corner and slid to the ground. Her once delicate and beautiful face was now streaked with tears. Xie Huai, you're truly foolish. Did you think I'd admire a useless man like you? I just wanted to be a general's wife, to have a complete family, children, a father, a mother. What's wrong with that? Xie Huai's reputation was instantly ruined, and everyone mocked him behind his back. Wearing the green hat, he almost raised another man's child, after learning that the children from his previous life weren't his own either. Xie Huai fell seriously ill. When he recovered, he seemed to have aged many years, with streaks of white appearing at his temples, and he soon retired from office citing poor health. Before returning home, he met with me one last time and asked that painful question that haunts all men. In my past life, it was clearly my fault. So why didn't you tell me the truth and even had the imperial physician help conceal it? Though the past life was nothing but fiction, answering this wasn't difficult. I suppose it might be because that woman loved you more than she loved herself, so he would rather be misunderstood than let his beloved fall from a battlefield hero to a worthless cripple in others' eyes. But what does any of this have to do with me now? Xie Huai remained silent for a long time, his shoulders trembling slightly when he turned away. It seemed he was secretly crying. Seasons turned as time flowed quietly by. Ninga had grown from a swaddled infant into a graceful young gentleman. In his dealings with others, he displayed not only refined manners but also remarkable tact. Even when handling his temperamental younger sister, he showed considerable patience. Seeing my eldest son so sensible filled me with immense relief. After Xie Che became chief minister, his demeanor grew even colder, yet beneath the bed curtains, there was noticeably more warmth. Amidst the continuous spring rain, I finally couldn't hold back from asking him, is what Xie Huai said about his past life true? He claims to be reborn. What about you? Are you reborn too? Xie Che smiled. The past life is too distant. Even if there was one, I can't remember it clearly. I only wish to seize the day with you, my love. He gently pressed a kiss between my brows, his tenderness as soft as water. I couldn't help but blush. Even as a mother of two, how could I still be so easily enchanted by my husband's charm? I'm truly hopeless. Xie Huai drew me into his embrace, watching me fall asleep. He couldn't help but recall that strange yet familiar old man he'd seen in his dreams many years ago. The old man held high office but remained unmarried his entire life. That man seemed to be nearing his end, yet before closing his eyes, he repeatedly gave Xie Huai earnest instructions. If you meet someone who makes your heart flutter, you must not let them slip away. Young Xie Huai found this notion laughable, with his cold heart and detached nature. How could he ever encounter someone he'd feel such ardent affection for, until the day he saw her on the street, that woman with a smile as radiant as sunshine, his own younger brother's betrothed? Only then did he realize what he truly desired. From beginning to end, there was only her. Just because you glanced back at me once, I've thought of you morning and night.